To begin with, this approach almost never works to begin with, and I think it's very important to stress this exact point because there is 100% a time and place for pushing your body past its limits. However, if you do this too early on in the recovery process, you'll ultimately end up getting nowhere. And that's largely because when your body has been hit by a concussion, an infection, a traumatic event, or damage from a certain substance, its ability to function at the most basic physiological level can be heavily compromised. And so every layer of complexity that you decide to pile on top of that will likely only result in one outcome, and that is symptomatic crashes. And let me tell you, for a body that's struggling to function at the most basic physiological level, certain activities like simply talking, standing up, reading a book, or scrolling on a phone can be all too overwhelming, and so it's entirely understandable as to why you're really struggling to add any sort of physical activity on top of this. We need to slow down for a minute, take a step back, and be very tactical with our approach towards this, because what we ultimately want to do is we want to ensure that the foundations that are responsible for running our body at its most basic level are working seamlessly, because this is ultimately going to be the thing that separates the people who are able to build stamina and those who aren't. But what are these foundations that I'm talking about? Well, simply put, they're internal neuronal systems that are responsible for allowing our brain to accurately detect variables about its surroundings so that it, in turn, can get the rest of the body to respond in an appropriate manner. You see, we have these very primal and specialized receptors that are located throughout multiple regions of our body, and what they're responsible for is taking in sensory information about our environment, converting that into a neuronal signal, and then relaying that signal to the brain. And just like with any part of the human body, these receptors can be susceptible to injury from multiple different avenues. And once this happens, real issues can start to arise, and the reason for that is because all of a sudden our brain actually struggles to gain a hold over what's going on around it, and as a result it then in turn struggles to command the rest of the body to behave accordingly. So just to give you an example of the importance of one of these sensory receptors, our vestibular system, which is located in our inner ear, helps us to sense changes in rotation and also linear accelerations, so whether or not we're moving forwards, backwards, up or down. It detects our head position relative to the force of gravity, and with this information it's able to instantaneously shunt blood to wherever it needs to be in the body in order to accommodate any positional change. When this system is working well, our heart rate and blood pressure should be able to respond efficiently to any change in body position so that blood travels to exactly where it needs to be, and none of this is ever brought into our own conscious awareness. However, if the function of this system were to become compromised, then the body would struggle to handle gravitational changes, and as a result, our blood pressure would be all over the place, and our heart would have to beat harder and faster just to pump blood to where it needed to be around the body, and all of this would end up expelling a ton of energy. So not only would the individual suffer with a handful of restrictive autonomic symptoms, but suddenly the basic activity of being able to stand upright would now be treated by their body as rigorous exercise, and as a result it would totally drain all of that person's energy reserves. And this whole mess ended up ensuing simply as a result of this inbuilt sensory system not being well enough equipped to handle the pivotal role that it was originally and specifically designed to handle. And our evolution gave us a number of sensory receptors just like this one in order to be able to handle the stresses of everyday life. However, the issue is that every single one of them is capable of being impacted adversely, and that's where chronic issues really start to arise from. But I discuss all of this and so much more in the Unbeatable Blueprint online course. I spent months putting together this course with the intention of totally changing the trajectory that you take your recovery in, so that you're able to finally get long-term symptomatic alleviation from your chronic suffering. But my hope from watching this video is that you start to acknowledge the fact that just pushing your body a little bit further each day might not be the most sensible approach when it actually comes to building any sort of momentum with your recovery. Because what you might not be aware of is that presently you might have dysfunctions within your body with the way that these sensory systems are actually interpreting the likes of gravity, positional changes, temperature changes, pressure changes, and visual stimuli. And by pushing your body past its limits, what you're actually doing is adding even more fuel to the fire. So sooner or later, what you might realize is that you have to change up your recovery plan of action in order to accommodate the function of these sensory pathways to get these sensory systems working as they were originally designed to work, because in turn, that will then allow you the foundation to be able to challenge your body that little bit more each day. And the way I was able to achieve this in my own case was by having the function of my brain and sensory nervous system thoroughly assessed by a trained chiropractic neurologist. And prior to this extensive examination, I was having serious issues with being able to stand upright, where my heart would race and I'd feel like I was about to faint. I was having really severe digestive pains with intestinal cramping and trapped gas. I was having major shortness of breath, and I was also super intolerant to any changes in temperature. And all of this contributed to me not being able to build any sort of stamina. But this professional was able to identify certain areas of neuronal dysfunction and hyperactivity within my brain, which were contributing to the emergence of these restrictive symptoms. And what this meant was that I turned up to his clinic with a body that wasn't adequately able to handle the stresses of everyday life. So he got me to perform some very targeted neurological exercises with the intention to first stabilize the body, so that all of these neural pathways that were delivering sensory information to my brain on a continuous basis were working as they were originally intended to work. And then what that then offered me was the license to be able to build capacity. So it was at this exact moment in my recovery journey that I realized that I had the physical capabilities to be able to slowly build endurance by pushing my body day by day and week by week. So the moral of the story and the message of this video is, please don't ignore the sheer importance of these sensory systems in delivering accurate and adequate amounts of neuronal signaling into your brain to help to keep your body in a state of balance. Because once disruptions happen within these pathways, you might find yourself spending years or even decades pushing your body to a point that it's desperately screaming at you not to go to. And as a result, what you'll end up doing is accidentally pushing your body down even further rather than being able to actually build it back up.